everyone, and thank you for joining us here on the Recruitment Roundup Podcast, which is brought to you by BMS Performance. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, BMS Performance is a specialist sales and marketing recruitment consultancy. For the last 30 years, we've been helping businesses across the UK recruit for vacancies at every level. I'm your host, Mike Leather, and every week I'll be joined by a new guest where we'll get stuck into the latest trends in regards to recruitment. We'll talk about insights, we share ideas, we share experiences, and ultimately we look to provide value to fundamentally help you, whether or not you're a hiring manager, a business leader, or part of an internal talent team, to recruit smarter, faster, and more effectively. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Recruitment Roundup Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Leather.
I'm the co-host, Sam Musiarira.
And today we are joined by a guest, Matt Blanchard from Sales Excellence Advisors. Matt, as a way of getting started, why don't you give an introduction to yourself, to the listeners?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So my name is Matthew Blanchard, co-founder of Sales Excellence Advisors. We help organizations with their go-to-market strategy. Ahead of this, I was actually inside of the sales performance management world with companies like Barrison and IBM, trying to make sure that people optimize their commission and bonus processes in line with business organization goals.
Matt, we are really appreciative of you joining us, and Sam and I are really interested in what you do, and really looking forward to this conversation. Before we spoke, I actually wasn't aware that this type of service and solution existed, so I'm fascinated by it as a way of us getting the conversation going. So sales performance management, in the sense of what you do, what is it? Like, how would you describe that?
Yeah, great question. And sales performance management's kind of been created as a bracket by Gartner, because what sales performance management really is it's a way to help organizations track the sales effectiveness of their teams. But in the way in which I see it is it's the way that you get an organization to align their corporate strategy with how they employ their staff, utilizing incentives, because there's two mechanisms in business, the carrot or the stick. If you give someone a smack with a stick, there's a negative connotation to it. If you give them a carrot, they're more likely to walk towards that goal. And that's what sales performance management does with incentives, transparency into what's expected of you and how you're going to get there, aligned with what the business wants.
Sam and I, again, were talking before this, and I was always under the impression that businesses did a lot of this themselves, and quite often some businesses get it right, and we've all worked in companies where the bonus schemes were fantastic, really incentivizing, and other ones where we feel like, I don't understand what I need to do, and also I don't know how realistic that is.
Yeah, it's a common theme. I think there was a statistic from Ebster that 75% of salespeople didn't hit their target last half. Now, what that actually means is they didn't understand how to get to their goal as well, because there's typically an alignment between, if you don't know what's expected of you, you don't go for it. A lot of organizations inside of the European territory have commission or bonus associated with the expectation of a role. But what they don't do is make it easy for us to understand how to achieve that goal. They try to confuse some of the salespeople, or inadvertently confuse the salespeople, which means that they don't know how to reach the objectives that are set to them. And therefore means that we've got a disengaged workforce and we've got a higher level of churn. And really, when we think about it, the most simple thing to do with a compensation plan is make it transparent so that people understand what's expected, and so that they stay because they're earning money. Because if a person's earning money, a company should be earning money if it's aligned correctly. If they're not, that's bad design.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Matt, I've just got a question, and you've touched on, I suppose, confusing salespeople, and I always think about it for myself as a salesperson. Why do companies do this? Why is it not transparent? Because all you ever want as a salesperson going into work every day is to know what's required of you, hit these goals, hopefully get paid a fair share, and everyone's happy. So why does this happen in the first place? I know every company's probably going to be different, but it can be frustrating when I think about some of the roles that I've had, but equally some of the conversations that I have with candidates when they're looking to leave some of the businesses that they work at.
Yeah, I think that there's two key reasons for it. One is the past. So we as sales leaders and sales operations don't like to change what's been working in the past, because it means we have to have a difficult conversation with stakeholders. And typically for something like commission, you have to go to the board members to get approval to make the changes. And the second one is because you don't actually understand the metrics you're trying to drive. If you think about sales incentives, we make these really complicated and convoluted calculations based on trying to balance what we want from a business perspective. So we may want revenue, we may want appointments, we may want customer satisfaction. But actually, one role inside of a business can't be held accountable for all three of those, because they're completely conflicting mechanisms or interactions you're going to have with a customer. So at a corporate level, we may want that, but at a personal level, we can't sustain that. And so they're the two reasons it fails, because we're constantly trying to manage the past versus look at what we're trying to do in the future. And we're trying to add too many metrics to it. I was at a great event with Alexander Group a couple of months back, and they asked, what is the prime number of KPIs or metrics that should be in a compensation plan? There was people in the room that were saying 7, 8, 9. They turned around and said the maximum should be 3, because there's only really 3 things that you can drive as a business and 3 things that a person can really understand. When you break it down like that, it means that it should be simple. But then at a board level, there's not 3 metrics they're trying to drive by. So there's conflict. And that's typically why somebody like myself has to help, because you have to manage that process of this is what our expectation is versus this is what we actually want.
Super interesting. I'm wondering, so how, as sales leaders, would we recognize that we've got an issue with something like this? Like, what would the triggers be? What sort of things should we be looking for?
First question is ask your people, do you understand your plan? Simplest question in the world. Do you understand how you make money here? And they'll then tell you. And if they don't articulate what the compensation plan is, you've got a problem. The second one is then, as a manager or as a leader, look at what you're being incentivized to do and look at what your team are being incentivized to do. And if they're not directly linked, there's a break in that program, which means they're not going to be the same across the business, which means you have a problem.
How many times has anyone ever been asked that by a leader? Do you understand what you need to do to earn bonus? Do you understand why we've got this scheme in place, what it drives? I can't remember being asked.
I don't think many people do. And do you want to know my hypothesis as to why?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I don't believe that the management team understand their comp plan 90% of the time. So if they don't understand their plan, they're not prepared to engage in a conversation about somebody else's, which means you've got this undertone of dissatisfaction across the business. I said to you before this, Mike, in the company now that gets an annual bonus at the end of the year that just goes into their account, and it's a team of engineers. They don't know how they've been paid it. They don't know what they're being targeted on. And at the end of the year, they just get a lump sum of money. And you ask people, what is the intention of this bonus pot? And they say, we don't know. It's just a nice holiday bonus. So it's completely irrelevant to what the business is trying to do, which is drive a better performance. And I think this is where leaders need to look at it, because we as leaders, and I've been there, so at different companies like IBM, I was in the middle, I was a cog. Like, let's be honest, at IBM, everybody's a cog other than the CEO. I didn't really understand how I could influence my team's compensation plans other than the target I was setting. But then when I made a case to our HR team to say, my team aren't actually being incentivized on what we're being asked to do. We're actually being paid for something completely different to what our business unit says. And we're meant to be experts in this. So if you take the time to understand that and map it, typically the business will listen, but it's then how do you underpin that with data? Because the next point is, do we have the data to support the plan that we're trying to put in place? It just takes a bit of time, but actually it makes life a lot easier. People with solid compensation plans that are understood across the business are factually found by Willis Towers Watson and others to have a lower risk of churn of employees. which means you've got a lower cost of sale because you're not having to recruit continuously. And as a leader, it means you can actually achieve your goals. There's nothing worse than, as a leader, of getting to the halfway point of the year, 2 of your main employees leaving, you're having to backfill, you've got a gap in your target, which means you're missing your number, all because you didn't set the foundation right at the beginning.
It's that ambiguity, isn't it, as well? As a leader, you need to be able to be clear with your team in terms so that they're focusing on the activities that push the boat forward. And by the sounds of it, a lot of businesses are walking around blindfolded, thinking, well, we'll do this because we think it drives that, but we don't know how that then drives the thing that we want it to drive, which is the bonus scheme. So yeah, it all feels like a bit of a convoluted mess that you need to sort out when you're going into companies.
It is, and then the question always is, okay, so do we need technology to support this, or do we just do this in Excel? And technology with anything is an enabler. So what it does is it optimizes the process. If you don't have the plan set up right in the first place, technology is not going to make it better. It's simply going to make workforce more educated on the fact that it's not working for them. So to get technology right, you have to get the process right. And I guarantee, if you go to most CFOs in a business and say, for every £1 of commission you're paying, what is the return in revenue to your business? They'll go, I don't know, because they can't do the correlation themselves, because they don't know what it actually means. One, because they don't have the data. 2, because they don't have the automated processes. But 3, because they don't really know how it aligns to how commission payments align to the actual goals.
Really, really interesting. Matt, I've just thought of a question now. You obviously touched on data and how data is aligned with obviously helping organizations grow and reach their goals. I mean, how would you say you use that data specifically for you guys? And then how does that then perhaps create predictable income and revenue going forward? What metrics are involved and what sort of things are we looking at?
Yeah, so I think if you consider, I'll consider it from a salesperson's role, and then I'll consider it from a manager's role, and then I'll consider it from an executive's role. So for a salesperson, whether you be an SDR, whether you be an account executive, you have to, you effectively are compiling data inside of a CRM typically, which means you're being asked to track your performance over a period of time. You don't really know why you're doing that. And that's why CRMs are typically full of bad data, because there's no correlation to the performance. Whereas if you link the tracking of information into your CRM into what if analysis on your commission. So what if this placement happens? What if this sales concludes? What does it mean to me? As a salesperson, then that data allows you to understand the benefit of you doing what you're paid to do as a basic salary. That's the first part. The second part is then when you move into a management role or a team leader role, you've got all of this data inside of your CRM tools, you've got your finance tools, you've got Gong, you've got all of these other tools that are there to support you. Now, what it's doing is effectively it's giving you the ability to have performance management discussions. But the performance management discussions that we have in the past are always linked to, you're not achieving this goal, you're not achieving this metric, you're not achieving this specific part. But they're all negative communications, which means the chances of it actually being successful are limited. Whereas if you start a performance management conversation with, hey, this is where you are in your bonus. Now you've got all of these things that are happening in your territory. Did you know if you conclude 1, 2, and 3, that actually makes £500 difference to you at the end of the month. Now, if we listen to the Gong information, if we look at your CRM tool, you do this a little bit differently, and that's the pot of gold that you get from it. So instead of it being a negative stick, it's a carrot drawn conversation. Very, very different, and very different outcome. Then the final one is at the leadership and executive level. You want to be able to manage and maintain your business in a way that's easy to forecast and consistent. So if you have that ethos across your business, consistency will be key, because you'll be able to track the effectivity of not just your comp plan, but the sales cycles, the periods of time it's taking to close. You'll be able to see outlier performance. So who are the people that we need to be giving more education to? Who are the people we need to move out of the business? Or, and again, it's not out of the business. Who are the people that we need to move from the bus? Because effectively, somebody that you've spent all that time training, you don't necessarily need to move them from the business. They're just maybe in the wrong role. They have all that knowledge, understanding performance, utilizing the data like this enables you to put the right people in the right positions to get the goals you want. And as a leadership team, there's nothing better than having a set of individuals that are harmonized and working in the same way because of transparency, all for the same goal, which is your goal as well.
Matt, how much of an impact would you say technology, given how it's evolving, we're talking about data now, everyone feels like they're selling more with data and insights, how much of an impact is that having on making sales leaders feel like there's more weeds growing up, so it's harder then for them to be able to see the path that they need to follow because they've got all this data, they've got all these activities, we need to do this, we need pickup rates needs to be higher, we need more meetings, we need more top of funnel activities, we've got all these tools now that automate cadences, etc. It's difficult, isn't it? And how much of that do you feel has an impact in your experience?
I think it has a huge impact. We as humans hate change, right? It doesn't matter if you're changing your socks, what types of pants you're wearing. We hate it. The difference in business is it's how you choose to utilize that and how it's underpinned by the business. If an organization is continually changing the process and continually changing the systems, there's no way for a manager to understand the objective of the change. There's no way for them to understand how they can, what the benefit is of the tools that are being given to them and how it can help their team. But moreover, we do a really bad job of deploying technology because we do this trainer mentality, which is let's deploy it, let's get it live, let's get everybody just logging in, because then adoption's great.
Yeah.
What we don't do is explain the benefit and why you should be logging into the system. So if all of a sudden you're able to see, okay, I should be logging into CRM, not only because it's you doing Big Brother and checking if I'm actually making the interactions, but because it enables me to do marketing campaigns that give me inbound leads that lead to me earning money easier, that's a very different conversation than just fill in your CRM and here's how you log in.
It's a really, really good point. Sorry, and it just made me think of an example because I was having a conversation with one of the sales leaders I was working with within a medtech organization, and similar. What happened to them is they brought in a brand new CRM, and the reps that were on the ground had to input lots of data, and a lot of the reps got frustrated. They actually lost quite a lot of top performers to other organizations because that structure wasn't in place. So I suppose, what can organizations be? In hindsight, they felt like they probably made a mistake in terms of how that was rolled out, and perhaps that educational piece. But what could organizations be doing? Because the data is right. Maybe the approach isn't right, but then what could they be doing better? Because it looks like it all should help us reach the goals that we're after, but it looks like if it's not done quite right, then there's going to be churn, there's going to be attrition, there's going to be problems further down the line. So if you're advising an organization, how do they do this kind of thing better in terms of using all these tech stacks that we have available to us going forward?
I think you need somebody that has a holistic view of what the business is not, and I keep coming back to it, what the business is trying to do, but how that technology underpins it. So if you think about it, everybody has a company statement at the beginning of a year. They then put OKRs in place. Now, if you link what your technology is doing to the OKR, the key requirements or key business metrics, it makes it easy for people to understand. But also it's the transparency as to why. I've been a firm believer. I worked with Telefonica UK about 20 years ago, and they did one of the best deployments of technology I've ever seen. They did a naming competition where before the technology was even being deployed, they were saying, okay, you've got a new performance management platform coming. What should the name of it be? And the winner gets an iPad or something like that.
Okay.
They then got that embedded. The name was then publicized. It was in the toilets. It was everywhere. What they then did was they gave a control group access to the technology, and the control group were the highest performing team inside of the sector. And what that did was it made it feel exclusive. What does exclusivity do? It means you want it. It meant all of the organization wanted it. Every day that different teams got brought on, without being notified, they would get a cup and M&Ms inside of that cup that had My Compass, which was what the technology was called, and a user manual as to what they should be utilizing the technology for. By the time the last team came on board, it was a bit of a joke for some of them, because they were like, well, you're clearly the ones that are going to get fired first from this. That team's performance increased so significantly that they went to being the second highest performing team inside of it, because they had a point to prove. What they did with that change management program was, not only did they make it collaborative so that everybody knew what was going on, but they made it really clear through documentation as to what the objective of it and why that technology was being utilized. We don't do that traditionally today. And in the example you gave about the CRM tool, what salesperson, I don't even need to sell salesperson, what person just wants to input data? You don't.
Yeah.
But if you were to gamify that and get a bit of a competition going and explain why, and then give them the opportunity to cleanse as part of a spiff, for example, they're more likely to do it. But if you just say you've got to input this because we need it done, they'll be saying, why can't AI do it? Why can't we get a robotic processing automation tool to do it? Because it's surely cheaper. It's making sure that it's understood the premise as to why they're doing it, but also giving them a reason to do it.
Matt, a question that's just come to my mind. In your experience, what correlation did you see or have you saw with the frequency that bonus or commission is paid versus like performance? Because we work with so many businesses across all different sectors, and you'll see monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly, annually, and you'll get businesses that they'll be like, well, we want a new business salesperson to drive brand new revenue. There's no leads, they're self-generating everything themselves, but they're on an annual bonus scheme. Another two things don't relate. So I'm just curious around this to see what you see in that respect.
Yeah, you can't get new business salespeople on an annual plan. It makes no sense.
It exists out there.
You can have it in an annual plan, but you can't pay it annually. So what we're seeing in market at the moment, COVID drove this, if honest, is more organizations across the world are now doing half yearly targets. So they'll do every 6 months, a new target is set for the sales organization, business development, pre-sales, customer success, even their engineering team in some cases. But they pay them on a monthly or quarterly basis. And the reason they do that is holding yourself accountable to a target is really difficult, especially if it's annual, because there's peaks and troughs in a cycle. The tech world always we've trained the buyer to buy in Q4. So what we need to do is make sure that we take that into account. By doing 6 monthly targets, it means that people can be paid in accordance with the likelihood of performance for that period. It means that they're more engaged because they're getting something in their salary, maybe every month, 2 months later, even if it's quarterly, 4 months later. You can't ask a new business person to go and try and sell something and then pay them in 12 months, because the chances of, at the minute, the chances of a new business sales development rep actually still being in that role is pretty low, because the churn rate in that role is so high. Annual bonuses are great for structured organizations where everybody's just paid for performance of their KPIs, like HR, legal, marketing. But for a sales organization, it has to be monthly or quarterly to really see the difference.
Why the 6 month targets? I've not heard of that and I've not seen it.
So if you think about what COVID did, and it was COVID, it was then the mini recession that the UK had when it exited Brexit, and then it's kind of filtered into Europe. So what COVID did was meant we could no longer forecast for the year ahead, because typically when you're forecasting, you go back 5 years and you run an analysis based off of peaks and troughs and you build into it. What COVID did was it meant that for 2 years the data was completely incorrect, and organizations couldn't build employee hiring, payments, staffing correctly because the data didn't support anything. So they were having to then so they would set annual plans, but then halfway through the year, because the team was so disengaged, they would re-baseline. Now, there's nothing worse than re-baselining, because you've already told your shareholders, your executives, the stock market, that you're going to achieve this goal. And if you have to go back on that, it's a very negative view. So by going to 6 months, what it means is, as a business, you can forecast based off of what you see, not what you don't know yet. And therefore, from a salesperson's perspective, they can get you to drive to the metrics and the revenue statistics that they want for that period. Now, I think with the American elections coming up, you're starting to see more of that, because if depending on who gets in, the dollar will either grow or weaken. And then what that means for European companies that have American headquarters is that they don't know, they can't predict the impact of that currency conversion in a short period of time. So 6 months compensation plans give them the opportunity to do that.
And practically, like the companies that are bringing these in, are they still targeting people over 12 months? And they're bringing the compensation plan into 6 months. If not, that's quite a step change, isn't it, for how they operate?
It is, yeah. And that's where technology is really playing a big role, because it's no longer just about giving. So technology does two things. It gives transparency to us over mobile devices and things like that, because we now live in a world where we want data in an instant. So that's what technology really helps us with. Excel doesn't do that. Now, if you think about the step change that business is going through to 6 monthly payment and target setting, it means you need technology there to underpin the target setting and the analysis phases and the scenario modeling. Because if you create a model inside of Excel and you send it to everybody via email, the chances of you actually getting an answer within 3 days is limited, because there's so many people that have to answer. You don't have a consolidated view. Whereas if you do that in a technology system where you have workflow and you know the people that are required to see it and you know who's going to give their feedback, everybody can see everything in one way, which it streamlines a process from probably a week down to a couple of days, which therefore means that people can undertake this shift change. But the investment in technology is actually not irrelevant. It is compensated by the fact that the performance, based off of what we're seeing in industry at the moment, the performance of this shift is seeing that organizations' revenue is actually increasing, because there is more accessibility to data, more of an understanding through transparency as to what's expected. They can actually see revenue increases faster than over an annual basis.
Yeah, I was curious on that. I was really interested in find out from you what outcomes that you see from businesses who get everything right in terms of performance management culture and performance management systems versus those that don't. Like, do you have any stats and how much they've grown their revenue versus ones that haven't, etc.?
Yeah, there's a couple that spring to mind. So did you know that us as humans do this thing called shadow counting, where we will sit there and we'll write down all the sales that we typically put, because we distrust what the organization's saying. The statistic that Gartner gave us is that a salesperson will do that for 2 hours of every month. So imagine that's 24 hours, which is 3 business days across your entire sales organization, of just them writing things down and then checking it against their statement. So by getting that transparency right, you don't need to hire more people, because your sales team will actually be doing more anyway. Then from an effectivity perspective, if you're providing transparency to the organization in a way that is trusted, there is deemed to be a 7% increase in revenue. So that was actually governed. That was actually provided by 3 people, and Ebster provided some great statistics to support this as well. But yeah, there's a direct correlation between transparency, understanding, and performance.
Yeah. Matt, just a question there, and you've spoken about transparency, performance, and how that links. And I'm really interested by this example that you've just spoken about I suppose a paranoia that comes in from certain reps and taking this data down, right? So my question specifically is there a link between, I suppose, high performance and that being a trait in someone? Because I can't imagine someone not being that good at sales and not being good at their job and caring that much to then do all this. Is this something that somebody's probably quite good at sales that will do? That's probably a bit more cynical and how they look at the organization, or have we not got that far? Have I sort of pushed the gun there?
No, you're 100% right. The top salespeople will always question everything, always, because they're trying to maximize, right? The top salespeople aren't just selling to the customer; they're selling internally. They're selling to their comp admin. They're selling to HR. They're selling to the manager. They're great. But the information of shadow counting comes from anybody that's earned some form of commission. So if you don't see people doing this, it means typically, if you consider a bell curve, they're in the fourth quartile. They're the people that are talent upgrade opportunities that require different positions inside of a business because they may not be monetary driven. But the top performers, I had a guy that worked for me. He was one of the best salespeople I ever had. Every month, there would be about 4 or 5 questions about 2 deals that he sold. So he would be challenging the accelerators based on the compensation plan he's in. And he's used Excel to calculate what it should be. And then I have to tell them, but the Excel calculation works to a different decimal percentage place. So it's not the same as what you're seeing inside of the system. The system is correct. No, but my Excel. And you waste all of this time because they're trying to argue over like 10 or 15 pounds. But actually, if they understood all of that in the first place, which we eventually had to go right back to basics, create a education plan to the sales organization, show that it was trustworthy, and then articulate it. With that, it was fine. But we knew you could tell he was a top performer because of the fact that he was arguing over 15 pounds. And there would be comments like, you're taking coffee off of my wife's table.
He's right, man. He's right. Don't be taking coffee off the wife's table.
Yeah. So, but you do see it, and I think that the interesting thing for me in my experience of being a leader in large organisations and subsequently helping organisations with this challenge is, if people are not being vocal about compensation or reward, it's because they're not earning it, which therefore means you've also got a different challenge inside of your business. So performance management, as we say, it's the ability for organizations to track performance. Tracking performance isn't just about high performance, it's about low performance. And so if people are disengaged, you're going to have a churn issue. Do you want that churn issue? Yes or no? That's a question only you can answer. If you want that churn issue, be prepared for replacement, because you can't have open headcounts for too long. Business doesn't sustain that. It's making sure you get into the culture of ingraining that across your workforce. Disengaged people and high-performing people, very different sets of interactions with management.
Matt, a big part of your experience is helping businesses with their go-to-market strategies. That's a hugely broad subject and not one we've got time to get stuck right into today, but just to focus on like one element of that, which I think, as a sales leader myself, is something that I'm constantly thinking about, which is the BD strategy.
Yeah.
Because as leaders, we want to drive as much revenue as we can, and to do that, it's bringing in new business and it's maximizing the existing business that we've got. What is your take on the sort of BD strategies, just from your experience, that aren't working as well as they used to, and maybe ones that you're seeing that are working well? I know it could be dependent on the market sector, route to market, all that stuff, but just broadly speaking.
Yeah, this has changed so much. I actually started as a business development rep, making 100 calls a day, and it was one of the worst jobs I've ever done. Like, you get told, it's the only place I've got more no's is in my dating life. So when you're going through it, you constantly getting asked the question, and at that point, when we're going back maybe 20 years, you're being asked to do a large number of interactions to people that aren't educated about you, that don't know the pain of the solution you're offering. And so therefore, what did I really expect? Like, there wasn't going to be a great outcome, maybe 5%, maybe. So that was the old day. And to me, the spray and pray approach is gone, because we as a executive community don't want to receive 1,000 inbound emails followed up by 1,000 calls about, I've got the technology for you that's going to help me increase revenue, decrease cost, and increase customer satisfaction. Every technology under the sun says that. My personal opinion, and what I'm seeing work in industry at the moment, is removing the spray and pray approach. You still put people into account-based marketing strategies, into sequences through marketing, utilizing of education of your brand, amplifying who you are and the pain point that you're solving. But from a business development rep perspective, you need to be more focused. So I've been advising people that instead of doing these 100 calls, let's target somebody on 40. But let's make sure that it's really focused. So what they need to do is that they need to review the company's beginning of the year statement. They need to look at their performance statistics. They need to be looking at information that's available on LinkedIn to see if they've had any fines. Like Citibank, one of the head of risk, just got 136 billion pound fine and lost 800 people inside of his team. Utilizing that data that's freely available to make your communication with the person you're targeting even more finite, even more important to them, because the benefit of that is that you're more likely to get an outcome that's positive. Now, the challenge I often get put at me is, well, hang on, that's just one interaction. Why would I spend that much time for one interaction? Well, it's not, because if you think about an organization, let's say we were to target BMS, you'd be targeting the CEO, you'd be targeting the COO, you'd be targeting the CFO, you'd be targeting sales leaders. So if you're doing that, that's already 4, and we don't know, maybe there's 5 sales leaders, so that's 9. If you gather enough information to make sure that it targets each of the personas, those 40 interactions you're having, that half an hour of education you're doing, means actually you've achieved a huge amount in a short period of time just by being better than your competitors. Because there's not many people that are doing this at the moment. We're all using sequences. We're all using GIFs. And I'm not one for GIFs, if honest. I find them really annoying. So if I do, I'm sure that other people do as well. But if you come to me and you say, did you see the score of the England-South Africa game? I noted that you were at the event with OVH. You've done your research. There's something about you. And then if you to link it to a pain that I've mentioned in a post, I'm going to pick up the phone and say, yeah, 100%, I'll have a conversation with you. And the really important thing is if you come to somebody and you do get the opportunity to speak to them and they're the wrong person, use the word help. As a human nation, we like to help one another. I understand this may not be of interest to you, and I understand it may not be the right topic for you, but can you help direct me to who the right person is inside of your business? Can you help me with what they may be interested in? Thank you very much for your help. Because actually, as if we think about it as a cycle, you walk across the street, you help an elderly lady, your friend feels bad, you help them. We as a nation we as a population want to help one another. Utilize that. So educate and ask for help.
Well, it's really, really interesting. There's so much that we could get into, right? Because this is, school of thought, old school, pray and pray, and you've gone on the specifics. And I suppose the question that I can perhaps think of here, and you're touching on maybe 40 different calls per day, when we're looking at a sales cadence or sales process now going further down the line, hypothetically speaking, I'm a BDR, going back to your BDR days, I've highlighted 9 different decision makers within an organization, and then I try to call these 9 people, and obviously none of them pick up, right? Because that's the world that these BDRs are in, frankly. So
Yep.
What next step of that cadence, what could that then look like? Because we still got tomorrow to come, we still got the rest of the week, and still want to convert this into pipeline. How does that then move the needle along, shall we say, going forward?
And it's a great question. I think if you think about it, an interaction or targeting somebody is a sequence of interactions. So the first part you have to do is you have to notify them of your intent as to why you're going to call. Now, if you do that in a targeted email, because email's probably one of the easiest ways to set an initial interaction, that's the first point, because then you've got something to follow up on. But we as a business development organization are trained not to leave messages. And we're trained because we think the person's going to save the number and then tell us and then block us, basically. That's why we don't do it. But actually, if you tell me why you're calling and you leave a voicemail, and then your number comes up again, and I want to listen to you, and I want to have that conversation, I'll talk to you. But also, if you know who you are, I'm more likely to engage in a conversation with you on WhatsApp. Because I may not have time to have a conversation with you, but I guarantee on the train, on the plane, anywhere I go, I'm on WhatsApp continually. Like, I will talk to everybody on WhatsApp. But if you ask me to write a big long email, not doing it. So it's engaging in different levels of communication technology that's available to you. But if the person doesn't know who you are, and if they don't know the purpose of your call, they can't help. So to your question, Sam, I think email is the first part. I think when you're calling, leave a voicemail, because leaving a voicemail then enables a person to understand what they want. After that, follow up with a secondary email, which provides a little bit more data on who you are and why. That then allows you the opportunity to do it. But business development reps that call me that I WhatsApp back are genuinely shocked, because they're like, you're WhatsApping. Yeah, because I don't have time to pick up a call for everybody because I'll be on calls with executives. I don't have time to write emails because I'm busy in my day-to-day. But during those calls, because sometimes we can multitask as men, it does happen every now and again, I can WhatsApp.
Oh, that's great. No, sorry, Matt. I suppose the key thing that I'm obviously taking away from that is, as a sales rep, that sometimes we get into, I suppose, maybe a mental frame of, I'm in work, and work should be call, it should be email, and it should be black and white, and I can't WhatsApp Matthew Blanchard because we've got him on this pedestal, and surely like this person's not gonna. So it's almost like an inferiority complex that I suppose some sales reps perhaps maybe struggle down the line when you're thinking, is this a professional way for me to be able to communicate with someone back and forth? But I suppose it's the more information, the more conversations like this we can have, the better. So no, it's really interesting, and we'll definitely be trying those targeted calls for you going forward.
It's like receiving WhatsApp voice notes, Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. And the interesting thing is what high-end luxury retailers have made WhatsApp acceptable. So if you go into Louis Vuitton or Dior or wherever, where your partner tells you you've got to buy her something nice because you've done something wrong, or because you haven't done something wrong and she just wants something, afterwards they ask for your WhatsApp number and they communicate with you based off of what they've got in store, the next releases, the exclusive packages. They make it so it's a personal relationship. You become that person's executive buyer. What's the difference inside of a recruitment world? What's the difference inside of a telecommunications world? What's the difference inside of a banking world? There isn't any. Really, we want a one-to-one interaction with somebody that we trust. And that's no different across it. Now, the biggest challenge and the biggest reason that people don't necessarily like using WhatsApp or struggle with it is because management can't measure it. It's encrypted, which means you as a leadership team can't see it. But actually, if they're doing it and they document it in a CRM in a correct manner, they can even take screenshots of the message they've sent and attach it to it. It's a way to track it, but it all comes down to businesses don't like to utilize new ways of technology because they can't track it.
Yeah.
So Matt, it's a great point. Sorry, Mike. I know you probably got a question. I've just thought of something. I've got to go. So, what do you then say then, Matt, to like people that are like, you can't close a deal on WhatsApp, right? And maybe perhaps you're a new customer, and a big part of we've got to have this conversation. We've got to really do my pitch as a salesperson, right? So what do you say to people that then say that? How are we then going to move this conversation from where we are on WhatsApp to get to a Teams call like we're having now, to be able to be even more direct and have the opportunity to move the process forward?
So what's the difference between a WhatsApp voice note, a WhatsApp communication, and a call? If you think about it, any interaction inside of a sales cycle is a bi-directional communication. I ask you a question, you provide me feedback. I ask you a further question, you provide me feedback. The difference with WhatsApp is we don't have the person on the call, so they can't put the phone down on us and they can stop the conversation whenever they like. That's the slight negative to it. But actually, if you think about it, it's an easier way to engage and do discovery, because you can ask one question, they'll give you information. That's really interesting. But somebody else has said this. What are your thoughts on it? You're not selling at that point. You're gathering information. And then by the time you've come to do your final pitch, or by the time you've come to actually engage in that final comment of, I would like a meeting, it's not, would you like a meeting to have a conversation about this? It's, based on what you've said here, I think I can help you with this, which will lead to a benefit of, and it will take 5 minutes to have this call. So let's take it in a recruitment world example. You're competing against Venatrix for a BDR role. So Venatrix offer workshops, and they do a really good job of it because they make people's lives easier. A business development rep is phoning into Matt at Barrison. Doesn't get me, gets me a voice note. We use Venatrix. What is it about Venatrix that's great? They take the hassle away. Well, I can do that as well, but I can give you a personal touch. Also, we are aware that industry standard fees are, boom, 10%. That's already cheaper than what I know that Venatrix offer. So as a astute executive, I have to save money. I have to engage in a conversation. Okay, so tell me how you help me with making my life easier. The service we provide does A, B, C. Perfect. Would you like us to send you some literature on it? Yes, please. The literature comes through, I don't respond. I've sent this through. Were you aware that in the last 6 months, there's been 15 positions that have been filled in the SDR role, and we've managed to populate 10 of them? I'd love the opportunity to show you some of the CVs that we get as the pedigree of people. Would you be engaged in this? Yes. Before I send these over, can I just have a quick conversation with you to understand the demographic of where the people can reside? Do you have any visa issues? Are they going to be direct employees or contractors? Just to make sure I don't waste your time. Boom, you're into a call. You've taken each of those points, which would be really difficult to get in a conversation with me, but broken it down into multiple silos, and you're more likely to get a positive outcome across multiple different executives because you're dealing with them in a way that's easy for them.
Matt, how challenging do you find having this conversation with sales leaders who might have been brought up in an environment where 100 calls a day works, 80 calls a day works, and that's still very much ingrained in their culture? It must be difficult because everything you're saying makes sense. I agree with you. The best way of you a prospect to me would be WhatsApp. I say that to everyone on my team. Like, I probably wouldn't take your cold call unless you gave me several of them, followed by other forms of outreach into me. But it must be challenging when you're speaking to sales leaders who have not quite made that cultural that shift. Like, how do you deal with that?
I think I often use true life examples. Blockbusters died because they didn't move with the time, and Netflix took them over because it was a new way of subscribing. Same service, made life easier. TikTok Shop is now the #1 route for selling. And if a business isn't on there, you're typically behind the curve. So if you're now thinking about business in the same way as you did when Blockbusters and Woolworths were around, you're not thinking about today's business. The world, the technology has changed so significantly that for organizations to become fast-paced and grow with it, they have to adapt. And when you say that to an executive and they have this realization moment of being left behind, they're more open to trying things. And really it is trial and error, let's be honest, because nothing works straight away. You have to do these things in isolation, using control groups to de-risk a potential move. So let's say a company has 500 recruitment experts, and they wanted to try the WhatsApp idea in 100 of them. Try it for 3 months, see what the impact is, see how difficult it was to sustain gathering that data. Then you prove the point, and then the executives can't argue it because facts beat opinion. Like, unfortunately, they do. So utilize the facts to support it. And remember, the world is forever changing. The only thing that is certain at the moment is we will continue to evolve technology faster than we've ever done before. We will continue to change the way in which we interact with one another faster than ever before. I can't remember the exact year that podcasts came into fruition, but that hasn't been around long. And think, book sales have decreased, book shops have gone. Podcasts are now the new way forward. So it changes based off of what the demand of the customer actually is. The demand of the customer is for interactions in a simple way.
Right.
Sorry, I feel like I'm preaching there.
No.
That was a great answer. Great answer.
Matt. Matt, obviously we've started talking about sort of go-to-market, and I suppose a question that I had regarding some of the conversations that you're probably having with sales leaders and businesses when they're looking to, I suppose, help reps hit their quota within the current market. So what sort of challenges and what are you hearing about at this time?
I think the main challenge with people at the moment is a lack of consistency. So they're being asked, but if you think about it, the world we live in now has changed so much because we've got so many different stakeholders and everybody wants to have a view of everything. And I think the lack of consistency back to the different areas of the business that helps drive it is something that's really proving quite difficult. And what that's leading to is a lack of collaboration across the business. So there's the silos that's being created, which means there's lack of communication, and therefore it's causing a I'm not going to say combative, but a broken business in a lot of cases. And so I keep highlighting this book called The 5 Silos or 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it basically it's a hypothetical book which talks about a new CEO comes into an organization. There's a legal manager, a marketing manager, a procurement manager, and a sales manager. and everybody's hitting their own objectives. Everybody's feeling great, but the company's failing. So how has that been possible? And it's because the dysfunctions and the silos don't take into account the business. It's a great book to read. It actually helps you look at your own business, because then you consider it independently and go, Jesus, that's us. And then you consider things that try and fix it. And I think that's the biggest challenge we're seeing at the moment, which is siloed organizations due to fast growth and due to changes in business.
Matt, we're fast approaching the end of this episode. We've nearly been on for an hour. I'm really keen, before we finish up, to get your take on, at the moment, based on experience, what you're seeing. What would you say are the main cornerstones of a high performance sales culture?
I'm going to give about 3 metrics, I think. So the first one's transparency. Transparency across the business is key to make performance work. Then it has to be, for somebody to be successful, they need to be persistent, because we live in a world of no's. We're taught no from a very early age. So be persistent, but be positively persistent, because persistence will lead to good outcomes. But then also look at it from an open perspective and be encouraging, because getting a no is still a good outcome. You know not to waste your time with that person any longer. Yeah. A yes and a no are outcomes. And that's really what we're asking people to get, which is, should we continue a conversation with this individual, with this company? To encourage the openness to make sure that you get what you want. But yeah, at the moment, persistence is key.
I love that phrase, positively persistent, because it just encapsulates a growth mindset as well, doesn't it? Which is something that all sales professionals need, whether you're starting out, mid-career, or you're an executive.
Yeah, correct. It's funny, even now, I'm having to do business development work into some of the executives that I want to work with. And I'm being very selective of who I work with. And I've got people that can give me direct interactions or direct meetings with them. I don't want that, because that's then me taking credibility off of somebody else. So I'm being positively persistent in pursuing these individuals on ways that I think I can help them, because I have to make sure that I hone my skills to be able to lead others. If I can't do it, how can I tell other people to? And so I think that's a really key thing to the world we live in at the moment. We've got technology that tells us what to do. We've got AI that apparently is going to replace everybody, but it's not. It's going to optimize what we do and make us more efficient. If I can't do what I'm asking others to do, then how can I guide on being positively persistent? How can I make sure that I'm being encouraging to people around you? You have to live and breathe what you're doing day in and day out, because then you really understand what's going on in your business, and you really understand how you can change it for the better.
As a final question from my end, Matt, when I think about where you've got to in terms of your career, and when you look at pay for performance models, I'm interested to find out where that passion came from you to, really want to get stuck into the industry. Where did that come from?
I love money. So if you think about it, I was a business development rep, didn't really understand what I was being asked to do as a salesperson, didn't really understand it. And if honest, the easiest thing to sell is something you understand and you're passionate about. And so the technology I was selling was basically making it easy for salespeople to understand how they were going to be paid commission, which is what I wanted to do. And when I sat there and said, okay, from my own experiences, have you ever been in a situation where you've had money taken off of you and you didn't know why? Yes. Have you ever been in a position where you've been overpaid? Yes. But I wouldn't tell anybody else. Have you ever been in a position where you felt so unhappy with the target you've been given and you didn't understand why? Yes. Our technology helps support that. I'm selling on pain points that are relevant to myself. So when I talk about pay for performance, it's because it's a passion of mine. It's something that every salesperson lives and breathes. It's something that every organization goes through. It's just to what degree they pay. Do they pay annual bonuses? Do they pay quarterly bonuses? Do they pay monthly sales incentives? Each one is a different lever you can pull. Each one has a different outcome. But to me, it's all quite interesting because it links to the psyche of a person as well. Carrot and stick. If I want my daughter to do something, hey, go clean your room. Hell no. Clean your room and we'll go and get an ice cream. She goes cleans her room. It's just human psyche.
Matt, we have a tradition on this show where we finish up with the guest illuminating us on what their favourite interview question is. So if you were interviewing a salesperson now for any type of role, what would be the one non-negotiable question that you'd ask anyone, regardless of what their level was?
It's really interesting. And actually, we had this conversation over a dinner a couple of weeks ago at an event. And the one question I always ask that I don't think a lot of other people do is, what do you want to get out of today's interview? Because it's a question that enables the person to feel comfortable with you, no matter where they are in a business. It enables you to understand how prepared they are, and it enables you to understand what type of person they are from an analytical perspective. There's been times where I've had senior salespeople come in and say, I haven't got any questions. You're not prepared. You've basically jumped on here and you're not prepared, because otherwise you'd ask me about the business, which territory you're going to be taking, how much people earn. I've had executives come on and say, yeah, I want to understand what the CAGR rating is over the last 12 months. You understand where the person is. And from the very beginning of that meeting, you know how much time you've got to invest in it. And to me, what do you want to get out of today is something that really sets them apart.
I love that. Yeah, I've not heard of that one before. It's something that we ask when we're on a client meeting or meeting with a prospect to start out with it, but I've not thought of bringing it into an actual sales interview. So that's one that I might borrow, I think.
Go for it.
Matt, where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Follow us on LinkedIn at Sales Excellence Advisors. Obviously, through this podcast, there'll be some details, I'm sure. And feel free. My email address is there. WhatsApp me.
Well, yeah, can't be forgetting the WhatsApp.
Great. Well,
thank you very much, guys. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been great, and really, really appreciate your time. And thank you for everyone that's listened. Hope that was as valuable to you as it was to us. And we will be back next week with another episode. Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Recruitment Roundup podcast. Thank you very much for listening to the show, to watching the show. We really appreciate your support. It would be absolutely fantastic if you could give us a rating on Apple, on Spotify, give us a review. Any feedback really, really helps and is massively appreciated. So thank you once again for joining us, and we will hopefully see you again next week.